there are a few kids that I think, God reveals to them when they're in like second grade that you will be a doctor or you will be an engineer. That's a small little handful. The rest of us don't get that word. We don't get that word in high school, and frequently we don't get that word in college, and probably don't get that word even in our 30s. Like what you are supposed to do is not always all that clear. But we tend to take that kid who knows from a very early age what he's supposed to be, and we set that up as the standard.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Refining Rhetoric. Today, my guest is Dr. Ben Merkle. He and I share a love of sports, and they do some rugby at NSA. And so we'll talk about the importance of sports and education and how that has corrupted our K through 12 and even college system, as well as what's the point of a classical education and can I really get a job with it? So you won't want to miss today's episode, so let's get started.
Classical Conversation Studios presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Refining Rhetoric. Today my guest is Dr. Ben Merkle. Ben is the president of New St. Andrews College, a classical Christian college in Idaho, where he has served since 2015. Ben received his PhD in philosophy from the University of Oxford in 2012 and is the author of The White Horse King, The Life of Alfred the Great, and Defending the Trinity in the Reformed Palatinate, his dissertation at Oxford. I did not attend Oxford, but Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Great to be here. Real privilege.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved with NSA?
Yeah. So, I've been in Moscow teaching at New St. Andrews since I think around 98 or 99. I'm not totally clear on when that was, but I started teaching like as a TA, as an assistant, and then slowly just got more and more sucked in until I was full-time faculty. I had a brief pause to do my additional graduate studies and then came back. I was the academic dean for a bit, and then in 2015, I became the president. Married to my wife, we've got 5 kids. All 5 have the top 3 have completed NSA, and then the next 2 are currently students at NSA. And the graduates are sort of spreading throughout the world at the moment with 2 grandbabies on the way.
Well, that's great, Ben. I love to hear that. My children are in classical conversations, and it's always interesting to me when, parents don't encourage their children to be involved in institutions they're involved in. That might say a little bit about what they really think about where they work. And of course, maybe NSA wasn't right or could be right for all your kids, depending on what they're trying to do with their lives.
I do think, just to jump in there, I do think that I think college is frequently misdiagnosed as made like everybody ought to do college or everybody ought to do my college. I don't think that's the case. I whenever I talk to prospective students, I try to say, first of all, NSA might not be right for you. We're not right for everybody. And also college might not be right for you. It's not right for everybody. It just so happens that my kids have a lot of my DNA in them, and NSA is a pretty good fit for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What do you look for in students at NSA? Because I know you're not trying to be a mega college, but you want them to be successful, and you're not trying to just invite anyone who's willing to pay your price to attend.
Yeah, I mean, we are trying to do a very specific thing. And, I tell our recruitment and admissions team that I think it's theft on our part to accept a kid to NSA that we don't think can use what we're doing well. So we want to do right by our students by accepting students that we think are really going to thrive here. What we're looking for is, I think, particularly kids coming out of that classical education, either classical school or homeschooling. Our student body our incoming freshman class this year was literally an exact 50-50 split between homeschooling and traditional schools. But most of them have some form of a classical background in that. So kids who were challenged by that, intrigued by it, want to take it to the next level. We're not looking to recreate what they did in their high school. We're looking to take what they got out of their high school experience and take it to that next level. So students that enjoy reading, arguing, enjoy the word, enjoy understanding the heritage that the church has given to them, that kind of kid. And I would also say we're looking for kids who are evangelically serious. If a lot of kids fantasize about their college education as being the time that they're going to get to experiment with things that they couldn't have tried at home under the watchful eye of their parents. And we're not the place for that. We're a place for kids who are like really serious about wanting to know God more, wanting to be more and more faithful, more and more Christ-like. When that love of God and love of learning comes together, you've got a really good NSA student.
Mm. Well, that's wonderful. I know a lot of our families listening to this podcast or watching on YouTube will relate to wanting to send their young people to an institution like that. Your mission statement says to graduate leaders who shape culture, living faithfully under the lordship of Jesus Christ. Is that just a slogan to attract people, or how do you see NSA students living that out, or how would you want to see NSA students living that out after graduation?
Well, one of the real challenges, like that mission statement is like just in the lifeblood. It's in the DNA. It's everywhere. Everybody knows it. We talk about it a lot. We measure everything by that statement. But that statement is really challenging because if you listen to it, it says to graduate leaders, which means when you want to go to find like how is this being fulfilled, it's not in our current student body. Now it was hopefully what happened while they were here causes it to happen, but it's really lived out in the lives of our graduates, our alumni. And so I try to watch the alumni really closely. We do an annual survey of graduates who are at 5 and 15 years out, and we track certain metrics to see how they're doing. But because we're a very generalist kind of school, it means that we're not giving a professionalized degree. So it's not like all of our students go into nursing or into engineering. So you can't track them that way. It's a much more kind of organic and anecdotal kind of tracking that we do.
Nice. As a generalist, does that mean there's one degree that people can get if they go to NSA, or are there multiple tracks, or how does that work for a student?
In our undergraduate, we have multiple graduate degrees, but at the undergraduate level, we have one degree, and it's a one general degree in liberal arts and culture. So we're trying to give a general humanities liberal arts degree that all of the undergraduates take. We do offer a music certificate for students that want to do a little bit of extra in music alongside that liberal arts degree, but in general, it's just really this one degree that they're all pursuing. And they can go in any number of different directions with that professionally.
That's great. I know a lot of people like to give liberal arts degrees a bad name, but that's probably because of the government institutions that are giving them. You mentioned earlier that you don't want to be a theft of a student. And I'm thinking that when you said theft of students, you weren't necessarily talking about the money that they're paying you, but more along the lines of the time that they're wasted at NSA if they're not going to be a good fit. So tell us, like, how is colleges have inflated their prices. How have you kept your price affordable? And more importantly, I think, why have you been able to drive such value to students in their time at NSA versus maybe the general college landscape that has quite frankly earned its bad name?
Yeah. I think, one thing just to the parents there, a lot of times parents or even students that are in the classical ed system, either homeschooling or in classical schools, one of the things they'll think is like, if I've already done K to 12 classical, why would I continue on to do classical at the college level? And it'd be just redoing what I've already done. But the thing is, and this is the bad news, what the parents in your system are doing right now is ruining their students for almost every other college out there. They're going to show up at college and they're going to go, this is easier than what I was doing my sophomore year in high school. Why am I spending money and wasting time on this? So I think that it's really at a school like NSA that those kids start to see the fruit of what they've been doing up till now. And the reason is because, you mentioned the liberal arts being sort of gutted and made worthless. And it's if you once you switch to moral relativism, then it's hard to find meaning in anything, which means it's hard to have a right answer versus a wrong answer. Everybody's right. then the standards drop way down, and all you need to do is smoke pot and be creative. And it's not really a rigorous education. And I think it's why people have moved towards the STEM world, because numbers feel more objective. But even there, we're seeing the slow gutting and cheapening of the STEM world. Once you return the liberal arts to the Christian tradition, and understanding that we have a God above us and that there is such a thing as a transcendent truth, then all of a sudden the liberal arts become intensely rigorous. They're intensely rigorous, but they're also it's affordable to give. You need a really good teacher, a text, and hopefully a room with heat. And when you have those things, you can give an incredible education, and your costs can be brought way down because you're focusing on that moment of education, not on the campus amenities that are there to win you to the school but distract you from the actual education. Or you don't have to spend money on the various virtue signaling DEI offices and various initiatives that are more about checking federal mandates than they are about actually providing a quality education.
You've talked a little bit about this Christian heritage. One of the things that my mom has recently said, and I've tried to start talking about too, is just the idea of this Christian capital in the United States has basically ran out. That now we're seeing the fruit of the modernist movement away from Christianity and Judeo-Christian beliefs into a humanist movement. And even like you pointed out on the STEMs, I was reading the other day that a journal article in a science magazine that basically was laying out the scientific reason why you need to have male and female research and how that's going to provide better drugs, better outcomes for the patients. That we can't just research humanity as one unit, but saying men need different research and women need different research. That got pulled from a journal because it's bigoted to think
Yeah.
that you would treat men and women differently. I know even like at universities, public universities and medical schools, they're teaching students now that men can get pregnant. So
Yeah.
as you said, we're seeing the STEM just kind of be destroyed along with the humanities. It's just maybe
Yeah.
taking a little bit longer time because the humanities kind of almost lead the STEM. So what do you think about this idea of America having lost its Christian capital, and what should parents think about if they are considering sending their kids to a secular 4-year university and what they'll experience there?
Well, yeah, there's a lot packed into that. I mean, one thing I would point out, and this has been, I think, particularly in the Christian world, kind of one of my frustration with the way Christians have approached education has been, as we've seen the moral drift in higher ed, there has been a tendency to gravitate towards the STEM, because the idea that this is where you still have objective truth because it's knowledge, it's numbers, equations, formulas, and I can sympathize with that. My undergraduate, I went to chemistry because I felt like I wanted hard numbers, equations, and whatnot. I felt like that was real knowledge. But one of the things you find out is that um, when you abandon things like philosophy, literature, and history, we tend to pull away from those because we say, are those even employable? Like, how do you get a job with a degree like that? But one of the things you notice is when we as a nation have abandoned our Christian heritage in philosophy, in history, in literature, when we've abandoned all of that, which I think is what your mom is describing in that loss of the Christian capital, notice what happens to the workforce. We don't even have, we destroy our economy, we destroy our cities with inane policies like defund the police, or just go back to the whole COVID lockdown and the way we respond to that, particularly with regards to our financial strategies, thinking that we can float our nation's budget on just the fiat of Congress. Those are philosophical questions and philosophical mistakes that if we were informed, we would have never gone into that. So you lose those sciences, you lose the workforce, you lose the economy, you lose your political system. You have to be sure that you maintain that element of our tradition. I don't think that absolutely everybody has to go, like I said at the beginning, I don't think everybody has to do 4 years at NSA in order to preserve this, but we need a significant chunk of our population that honors that, respects that, and some that are really diving into it to make sure that it's passed on.
You guys take the higher ed a different approach, a little bit differently than most institutions. Like, what do you think the purpose of sending your kids to college? Because I think more and more parents are agreeing, if just because of the value proposition isn't there for higher education. But what would be the ideal purpose for a Christian parent to make that decision to send their kids to NSA or, maybe one of the other dozen decent schools left in our country?
Well, I would say, so you mentioned how the sort of value proposition of higher ed has really shifted and become one very particular thing, which is it's a piece of paper that gets you into the door for a particular job. And the notion is that you have to have this piece of paper in order to get this job. That that notion is being increasingly challenged and starting to appear. To be completely false. And a lot of people are seeing through it. And that's why I think you have a strong movement saying maybe we don't need to send our kids to college. Well, if your goal was to get them a job, yeah, you didn't need to send them to college. Colleges do not guarantee you a job, and frequently they get in your way of getting a good job. There are some particular careers you need to have that piece of paper for: engineering, nursing. There are some careers you have to have that. But by and large, for most people, I don't think you necessarily need that piece of paper in order to get the job. There's something different that we ought to be prioritizing with those 4 years of college. One of the things I constantly hear from parents is that, well, look, we gave our kids a K to 12 education. Their Christian worldview is formed. They're established. Now we just need to prepare them for the workforce. That's why we're just going to send them to the secular university to get that piece of paper. But when I hear that, I always ask, okay, so tell me, the years 18 to 22 in your life, were those the inconsequential years where nothing big happened? Were
Yeah.
those the years where like little changed in your life and your formation of your soul and your convictions, all of that? Or were those some of the most momentous and probably the most like outsized leverage over the rest of your life in terms of having an impact? For like 90% of us, 18 to 22 is the most formative part of your life. Um, I think a college like NSA is really, really pivotal in that when you spend those 4 years in a place where you're getting your Christian and your intellectual and your moral formulation all pushed together in this really rigorous way, it has a disproportionate effect on forming that person for the rest of their life. And I would say one big impact from that is certainly their professional life. I think that we set students up to pursue work and vocation in a way that really massively overqualifies them compared to a lot of their competition in the job market. But it's not just that. They're set up for marriage. They're set up for church leadership, for being a part of a robust and evangelical church, for starting families and raising kids, for being leaders in their community, politically engaged, all of those things all together. So it's the vocational side is there and is really strong, but it's combined with much more. And I see the data on our students, our divorce rate. I think we're looking at a 2.5% of our alumni interviewed at that 5 and 15 year point are divorced. The number of them that
Wow.
are the percentage that are still faithful, it's about 2% that have fallen away from the faith. The percent that are continue to be committed to Christian education is right around the same sort of success rate. They are not putting their kids in the public schools. They're committed to this worldview that their parents raised them in, that they want to pass on to the next generation. You take that 4 years and you put it somewhere else, and you get a very, very different product. And the evidence is all around us. I just don't know why we won't open our eyes and see it.
Football.
that's, that's right. And I'm torn on that. I like college football. I love college athletics, and I think that they've completely destroyed the college experience. But I'll still watch a game because I think it's a good game. But
Yeah, I talked to the head of Yes Every Kid about they're pushing school universal school choice. I would say they're less enthusiastic about it than some of these other think tanks that are pushing it. But he said, what I really need to do is get rid of Friday night lights. That Friday night high school football experience is what drags Christian kids and private educators into the public system more than anything else that they can point to.
That's when I look at classical schools that are starting, you'll see this regularly where classical schools start, they're thriving through their elementary, and then when they get to about mid-junior high, they start losing all their students, and they can never get to a high school because the kids love the education, but as soon as they realize they're missing out on prom and football, they're out, and they just can't hold on to them.
Hello, everyone. I'm hoping that I will see you at our National Events Weekend on May 2nd through 4th, 2024 in sunny Southern Pines, North Carolina. This is being presented by our Classical Conversations Foundation. It is a time for CC families from around the nation to experience 3 days of events and learning about classical education and celebrating the hard work of fellow families on their homeschooling journey. Some of the major events we have are our national conference, where myself and my mom will be speaking, along with other panels such as a grad panel and a dad panel, and you'll hear a lot about the math map. We'll have a national commencement, so if you have a graduating senior, this year we've actually doubled the number of commencements, so we've added a second one so we can allow more people to come and celebrate with us, so be sure to look out for registration for that. And of course, we have the National Memory Master Competition, where one student will win $10,000. And it's such a fun time. And we are going to be opening that up to the public for the first time, so you can sit in and watch it. And it's going to be an exciting time. There's a ton of things on the agenda. We'll have food trucks. We've got camps for your students. So if you're a Classical Conversations family, we are encouraging you to come May 2nd through 4th, 2024. And you can learn more by going to classicalconversationsfoundation.org today. And again, that website is classicalconversationsfoundation.org to get your tickets, and we'll see your family there. Yes, as a athletic human being who played college sports and played adult sports and whose kids are in sports, I can't prioritize sports over. So our prioritization of athleticism is just backwards in our country, and it really is destroying us. It is circus.
Yeah, it's a machine that is grinding people up, and we can't pull ourselves loose from it.
So we had a kid, same thing, local kid, great family, loved the Lord. He still loves the Lord, but was put into the local public school system. Captain of the high school football team, said, I didn't learn anything in high school. It was a 4-year educational waste. His parents wanted him to go play college football. He went he's topped out at a 5'9", went played D3 football halfway through the first semester, quit the football team and never picked it back up again. So again, still loves the Lord, praise God, went to a nice Christian college, but it's like, okay, you literally wasted 5 years of their transformational life pursuing an athletic endeavor.
The D3 system lives on that. So if you're playing in a D3 school, you're not getting a scholarship. You're covering their massive tuition with student loans, and you're taking it all out, not because you were promised an education, but because you were promised a slot on a football team or a basketball team. So you get a lot of these kids that had in high school this dream of being a college athlete. 99% of them are not good enough to make D1. But then a D3 school will come along and say, listen, I'll make this deal with you. If you pretend like this is an education, I'll pretend like you're an athlete, and we'll put together this little team that probably could have been beaten by your high school varsity team. But you got the duffel bag, and so you'll go into $120,000 in debt because you got that duffel bag.
What is the right place for athletics in college and in high school? What do you see?
Yeah. So I mean, I share your love of sports. I think that athletic competition accesses a portion of the soul that can only be brought out on the field and can't come out when you're writing an essay. And I think that particularly young men need that part of their soul pastored, shepherded, mentored, and all of that. So I do think that there is a great thing to have competitive sports. At NSA, we do intramural rugby. I wouldn't mind having a team that competed, but I think you just have to be really careful about the culture that you're bringing them into. There's a drinking culture that 18-year-old man is frequently not ready to be able to get through with wisdom. But So we have intramural sports, rugby. We do basketball, volleyball for the ladies. We're going to do a track competition this spring. That'll be the first time we've done that. We've had clubs that compete outside of NSA. We've had a rowing club that's competed at the national level and continues to do really well. Very impressive what they're doing with almost nothing. I rowed when I was in Oxford. I love rowing because it's like, if you can imagine doing deadlifts for cardio, for like 5 minutes of cardio, that's a rowing race, and it's just brutal. So I think those kinds of things are good. I think where you have to be really careful is you cannot overfund it. It really needs to be volunteer and not hyper glamorized. And I think you need to make sure that your student athlete gets all the exact same treatment as anybody else as a student. His grades are not padded. He's not given a special path through the academic program because of being an athlete. But when you can get a really truly robust competitive athletic experience alongside a really good rigorous education, I think that that's a handy thing.
Yeah, no, being part of our club rugby team, definitely, can say that we were self-funded. We had to call alumni, ask for donations if we made it to nationals. That those were all transformative experiences
Yeah.
versus you see like big sports now where everything's just handed to them.
Yeah.
With the new NIL deals, they just are now getting paid to play, and you can see that this is a slippery slope. And I agree with you for sure that we need to have our kids be athletic, but not over dramatize it. And especially, I don't want to get off topic too much, but I just think it's doing a disservice to the poor in our country where we tell them that athletics is a way of getting out of it, and it truly is not a pathway. Learning how to read and write and think well, which you can achieve through classical education, is really the pathway to generational success.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there are elements that learning to push through pain, learning to discipline yourself, learning to get up early, learning to deny yourself certain pleasures. Those are all things that can be really wonderful for actually really necessary for a young man and preparing him for success. But those increasingly are not the lessons that are being taught by our athletics. It's the exact opposite, which I think is just really sad.
Now, one of the things that we've been talking about on this is universal school choice. And one of the things that's interesting about NSA is you're one of the least expensive private colleges in the country. You're super transparent on your tuition costs. And my understanding is you're not taking federal funding. So why not take federal funding? It's available. It's free. Basically, it's probably going to get forgiven one day. Aren't you putting your students at a disadvantage that you're not allowing them to take this free candy?
No, I think it's really important for us to not take that federal money. There's a few things it does. For one thing, it keeps our tuition truly tuned to the price signals of the free market. Like we know what it costs to do what we're doing, and that's the cost that we charge. And so I think that's really important. If we overprice, then we lose students, and we won't be able to continue. So being tuned to the price signal of the free market, I think, is really important. I think that the other thing is, and this is the main part with the federal money, is that money comes with strings, and there are ideological strings attached to it that will steer your priorities as an institution. And there is an agenda that is being forced on schools, and it will come through that federal money. The Title IX and the Title IV and Title IX come together to attach certain strings, particularly with regard to definition of marriage, definition of gender. Those things are attached to that money, and when you take that money, you put yourself in a really difficult spot if you want to hold to a truly distinctive Christian worldview with your student body. I think that compromise is really behind a lot of the. If you look at our Christian colleges, most of them are slowly shifting far to the left, and a lot of that is attached to that federal money, trying to make sure that they're in compliance with whatever federal dictates are coming.
But don't wouldn't they just stop taking the money if it compromised their Christianity? Why is that? Why is that not a good argument? And why do they continue to take the money?
Yeah, I mean, once you get addicted to that money, like if you were to grab the typical Christian college budget and you were to pull everything back, the single largest contributor to that college's budget, assuming they don't have one of those $7 billion endowments, your typical Christian college, the single biggest contributor is that federal money. And even those schools with the huge endowments, in terms of what they're actually pulling from their endowment, their draw from federal money still tends to dwarf even their draw from their endowment. They're just piling that money up. So the idea that they would just say no to that money tomorrow because they had a difficult decision to make, I don't see it happening, because they've already, all those difficult decisions, most of them have already made in the wrong direction. The GLBTQ, whatever groups are on all of their campuses, are already a part of their budgets. They're not making those hard decisions. They're going in the other direction.
All right, Ben, it looked like God was about to call you home with that sun coming into your frame. So if you're on YouTube, Ben was not being called into heaven. Just the sun was coming up in Idaho. The question I wanted to ask you: have you seen any colleges, Christian colleges, weaning themselves off the federal teat as it would be, or do they have like a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan on saying, we can't drop it tomorrow because of our economics, but we're going to start taking less and less over a period of time?
When I first became president, I would go to these conferences and and when the idea of dropping federal money would come up, it was introduced as a ridiculous concept that almost nobody would consider. NSA was this kind of weird college that was on the fringe. This last meeting I was at with our accreditors, they said that now a full 20% of the colleges they accredit have taken themselves off of the federal money, which is a huge, I mean, 20% is still a minority, but it's a huge increase from where we were just a little while ago. And now there are consultant groups whose whole product is coming to your institution and helping you figure out how to get off of federal money. So I think this is something that's coming. It reminds me honestly of like early years of homeschooling, where it was like, first it was this weird little fringe something. I can remember as a kid in Idaho when people were literally in prison for homeschooling. And now it's like this, it's all over. It's common. It's totally normal. And it's a superior education than the public school system by a long bit. So I think that we're on a trajectory. I think that people are waking up and seeing it and making that decision.
That's beautiful to hear. That's unexpected, and it makes me hopeful. One of the things that also makes me hopeful, of course, we've got more and more NSA graduates going into the workforce and into our communities. We had about 2,500 Challenge 4 graduates graduate this past year. We're continuing to send more and more students to higher education or to the missions field or straight into entrepreneurship. As a college president, a lot of times people don't start thinking about their, next step for their kids until they're like second semester junior or senior year. And while you can do that, you're almost behind. So I was wondering, to finish off this podcast, if you were to talk to a sophomore, maybe in classical conversations today, what would you tell them to do over the next, 2.5 years to prepare for whatever God has for them next?
To prepare for the whatever. I think that well, so one thing I would say is keep an open hand. There are a few kids that I think, God reveals to them when they're in like second grade that you will be a doctor or you will be an engineer. That's a small little handful. The rest of us don't get that word. We don't get that word in high school, and frequently we don't get that word in college, and probably don't get that word even in our 30s. Like what you are supposed to do is not always all that clear. But we tend to take that kid who knows from a very early age what he's supposed to be, and we set that up as the standard that everybody's supposed to be measured by. I don't think that that's the case for most of us. So the first thing would be like, don't stress out, keep an open hand. I think that the education, particularly the classical education and the liberal arts tradition, is it doesn't name for you this one career that you're preparing yourself for the way a lot of other education tracks tend to do. And they tend to think that like, okay, I've got certainty because I know I'm going to be an accountant or I'm going to be in marketing or sales or whatever. The liberal arts education is far more general and aims at the core of the person, teaches you to be a critical thinker, to be gifted with the word, to be able to read, listen, to be able to write and speak. It teaches you how to make decisions, to be creative, to be self-motivated. And I would urge you to be confident that those are the skills that are going to serve you the best long-term into life. I mentioned I was a chemistry undergraduate major. I'm now the president of a liberal arts college. The idea that the name in my education or in my degree dictated the career that I would have, it's not true for me, not true for most people that are out there. Worry more about focusing on those core skills and faithfulness to God. When you combine, love of God, faithfulness to Him, and a rigorous liberal arts education, you're prepared for a whole diverse range of careers. You don't know what's coming. And in all likelihood, once you get that job, you're going to change 2 or 3 times laterally until you find the place where you're really well suited. The other thing is, I think a lot of people are concerned that because we have an increasingly tech savvy world, that you need an increasingly tech savvy education or degree. And there's an element of that's true. But one of the things you're noticing is as our workforce becomes more technical, we're noticing that jobs disappear and new careers appear really regularly. Things that you used to always have to hire somebody to do now is done by a computer. And then this new thing that never existed before, we're expecting people to be ready to adapt and pick that up. I think that it's not so much that very technical education that will prepare you for the world we're facing. It's the versatile education, the ability to be self-taught, to learn, to figure out new things, to be creative, to be entrepreneurial. The workforce that we're facing, robots are going to take those other jobs. You want the versatile education for a versatile job force.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. So continue your classical education because that's really going to prepare you for whatever the economy does next, good or bad.
I mean, people think that because classical sounds like it's looking backwards, that means it's this ancient and outdated education. It is one of the most forward-looking ways to prepare yourself for the world that we're entering into.
I love it. Well, Dr. Merkle, thank you so much for being here today. Can you tell our listeners or our viewers on YouTube, how can they get a touch of New St. Andrews? How can they take a tour? What's the best way to follow you and your work?
Yeah, nsa.edu is the webpage. Give that a look. There's a newsletter that you can sign up for if you want to be hearing more about us. You can also reach out to the recruitment team if you would like to. You can make a virtual visit where you can visit NSA online, or you can come and visit us in person. I would also say for high school students, we do a 1-week worldview camp is the name of it, and that is here in Moscow. If you want to have a week where you just get to experience NSA Moscow and have a really incredible time of knowing God and understanding Christian worldview, I would highly recommend that.
All right, nsa.edu, and go check out the Called Conference if you're a high school student wanting to strengthen your biblical worldview and doing it through a wonderful institution. So thank you so much. God bless and have a great day.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, if you're watching this on YouTube, please give us a big thumbs up and give us a comment about what Dr. Merkle said that you enjoyed the most. Please share this with a friend and subscribe. It is so important that we get these episodes out there. And the only way we can do that is by letting the algorithm know that you enjoyed it and that they should share it with other people. So you can do that today to help me out. I would really appreciate it. And let's go have a great 2024.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation. And visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.